Good afternoon. On behalf of Engineers Australia, I'm delighted to welcome you all to our Infrastructure Thought Leaders webinar on the accelerating development of machine learning in construction. My name is Amanda Rogers and I will be your host for today. Firstly, Engineers Australia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to their cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that our webinar today is being hosted with our industry partner, Oracle Construction and Engineering. Asset owners and project leaders rely on Oracle Construction and Engineering software for the visibility and control, connected supply chain and data security needed to drive performance and mitigate risk across their processes, projects. So organisations can feel confident in their digital transformation with modern cloud solutions that grow and scale at every step of the journey, enabling efficiency, collaboration and change control for teams that plan, build and operate critical assets. I'd now like to welcome our first speaker, John Davies. John was appointed as the first Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Construction Association on 1st of July 2020, after leading the Queensland Major Contractors Association for 2 years. John has over 30 years construction industry experience, supporting the successful commercial delivery of projects in Australia, the Middle East, UK and Asia. John is a passionate advocate for change. He is driven by a desire to ensure that every level of the industry is sustainable, resilient to boom and bust cycles, and able to deliver the infrastructure society needs in a collaborative and efficient manner. Please welcome John Davies.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm now going to talk to you about construction's COVID opportunity. That is the opportunity that our industry has to reform, to become more sustainable. And what does that really mean? So just to start off with, let's sort of recap around the construction industry here in Australia and the importance of the construction industry here in Australia. Construction employs 1 in 10 of the workforce in Australia, contributes anywhere between 7 and 8% of GDP, is the third largest industry in Australia, and probably most importantly is that graphic in the top right hand corner. For every dollar that is spent on infrastructure here in Australia, there's a $3 kick on to the wider economy. And that is why in times like we have currently, where there is a recession, the governments turn to investment in infrastructure to lead the economy out of recession. But unfortunately, the industry that is being called upon to lead the economy out of recession is not in good shape. We have worsening productivity. We have poor financial outcomes. A lot of you will have heard about the profitless boom. Well, that is true, and there are statistics to back that up. We have a boom and bust investment cycle. That is nothing new. But here we are in a boom part of the cycle, and probably if nothing is done, we'll end up moving in a few years' time back down the other side towards a bust cycle. There's been a significant rise in mega projects over the last few years. I must admit, I can remember probably only 5 years ago getting excited to see $1 billion project come to market. And now none of us even bat an eyelid when a $1 billion project comes to market. We only start to get excited when we see a $5 billion project, $6, $7, $8 billion project. But these mega projects are not particularly helpful for our industry. Our industry has got a pretty bad track record at delivering them in terms of delivering them on time and on budget, and an even worse track record when it comes to making any money out of them. Our industry has also got a significant diversity problem. Only 12% of our workforce are women, and that situation gets even worse when we look at blue collar, and the number goes down to single digits, 1 or 2%. We have a significant mental health problem as well. Our workforce is 6 times more likely to die from suicide than they are from a workplace incident. And if all of that wasn't enough, then last year along came COVID just to compound everything. But COVID also provides a significant opportunity for change. We have a government that is relying on the construction industry to lead the economy out of recession. It's looking for industry to leverage the social and economic benefits of that investment. The government has a significant concern around the capability, capacity, and skills of industry to actually deliver on this pipeline of work. And longer term, they've got a real concern around the productivity of industry. The requirement to construct infrastructure isn't a requirement that comes along every time there's a recession. This requirement is a continual requirement if we are to keep our economy competitive on the global stage. So therefore, once this record level of investment has passed, we will still need to keep constructing infrastructure. But the problem that we will have is that we will be fiscally constrained following all of the support that the government has put into supporting the economy and keeping people working, job keeper, job seeker. And so there will be a real increased focus on trying to do more for less. And as an industry, we've got a pretty shocking record when it comes to productivity. If we look back over the last 30 years and look at productivity growth, construction lags other major industries by 25%. If we were to put that into some context, if we were just to half that gap in productivity growth, not get too ahead of ourselves, just look, let's try and half that productivity gap, we could be constructing an extra $10 billion worth of projects every single year here in Australia for the same amount of money, or employing an extra 10,000 workers. So if we all agree that there needs to be a more sustainable construction industry, and I'm really pleased to say that I don't think I've come across anyone that doesn't agree with the need for a more sustainable industry, what does that actually look like? Well, at Australian Constructors Association, we've done some work in this area, and also as part of our involvement in the Construction Industry Leadership Forum, which is ourselves, the Victorian and New South Wales government. We've come up with a model for a sustainable construction industry, which is built on 3 key pillars. And those pillars are an improved industry culture, increased sufficient capability, capacity, and skills, and equitable and aligned commercial frameworks. And all of those 3 key pillars are interlinked, which means that if we want a more sustainable industry, we can't just focus on one of those pillars. We can't just say, okay, commercial frameworks, let's look at commercial frameworks. Let's just fix up commercial frameworks. And the best example I can give of how those 3 are interlinked is if we look at the commercial frameworks that we've utilized over the last 10 or more years. They've driven a very adversarial culture within our industry. And now that adversarial culture is impacting on our ability to attract and retain the people that we need to into industry. So if we focus on those 3 key pillars, what can we do about them? And what are the opportunities if we can do something about them? Well, starting off with culture, if we can improve culture, it stands to reason that we can improve the levels of trust and collaboration in our industry that are essential for improved project outcomes. And in terms of improved culture, I mentioned just now the Construction Industry Leadership Forum. Very early days of Construction Industry Leadership Forum, it was identified that culture was going to play a major part in trying to reform our industry. And such a major role that it was decided to set up a separate working group specifically to address culture and improve culture within the industry. And that was called Construction Industry Culture Task Force. Now, that task force is currently working on a culture standard, which will be out for consultation by industry in the coming months. And the intention is that that culture standard will be embedded into particularly government procurement to try to improve the aspects of our industry, the things that are going to make a change to the culture. This isn't a one-page document. This is a 10, 15-page document, a detailed document that goes to the heart of the problem and has been developed utilizing academic research as well. Moving on to the capability and capacity issue. Leaving aside the fact whether there is a capability capacity issue, I think that a lot of people anecdotally will say that there is. And we have Infrastructure Australia have been tasked with developing, undertaking a particular piece of work to identify, to map skills and capability here in Australia and overlay it on top of the pipeline of works to identify whether there are real capability and capacity shortfalls. Assuming for a start that we do have a capability and capacity issue, how do we address that? Well, I hear a lot of talk, people saying, well, let's just relax the visa requirements. Let's just bring people more in. There are more people in. Well, I mean, let's assume for a fact that we can do that. The next problem that we have is that the borders are likely to be closed. International borders are likely to be closed for some time. Even when they open, I was on an international panel discussion the other day with my peers from the United States, Canada, Europe, and the UK. And one of the common themes that came out of that is that everyone is going to be competing for resources because all these jurisdictions are looking to invest in infrastructure to lead their own economies out of recession. So where does that leave us? We've got to focus on doing more with less. We've got to become more efficient. We've got plenty of examples of how we can become more efficient. We have issues whereby tier one contractors are asked to submit project-specific traffic management plans as part of their bids, when we all know that they are capable of producing that if they're successful. So why do we ask for that? That's 100 hours of engineering time times 3 just for that particular traffic management. We have issues with multiple layers of design review that have crept in over the years. There are plenty of opportunities of how we can become more efficient, and we have to use this opportunity to become more efficient. Then we come to the issue of equitable and aligned commercial frameworks. And what we've seen over the last few years is a realization, I think, finally a realization by major clients that they can't achieve certainty of outcome by parceling up all of the known and unknown risks, getting a fancy lawyer to prepare a watertight contract for them, and then standing back and watching the contractor struggle on as a project goes ahead and these risks are realized, which is why I really like this particular slide, this particular picture, because I think it sums it up quite well. We've had a number of issues, major projects recently that really fall into this category. If we look at Sydney Light Rail in Sydney, we look at Westgate Tunnel in Melbourne, and we look at Kingsford Smith Drive in Queensland. In each of those instances, the client thought that they could parcel up all the risk, pass it over to the contractor and sit back and watch what happened. And in each of those instances, problems came about, and the stakeholders that were involved in those projects started to get a wee bit upset. So the people, for example, the shopkeepers in George Street, when George Street was still ripped up and their trade was suffering, it wasn't Acciona's door that they went knocking on and saying, what are you guys doing about it? it was Transport for New South Wales. And it's the same in all of these instances where it is ultimately the asset owner that is faced with the pushback from these stakeholders. And it's that asset owner that ultimately is forced to negotiate with the contractor, despite their wonderful, highly expensive contracts, watertight contracts that they've obtained. And they end up in a discussion with the contractor saying, essentially, how can we make the pain go away? And there's a negotiation, a deal done, and things move forward. So there is a realization now that the old way of doing things really doesn't work. So what does work? I think we have to look at more collaborative frameworks to support collaboration, collaborative commercial frameworks to support collaboration. We've seen with both BIM and Lean, both sort of things that could have been proven to substantially improve project outcomes, both of which have been around now for close on 30 years, and neither of them have been taken up to their fullest extent. And you ask yourself, well, why is that? Well, my belief is that both of those concepts rely on open and transparent sharing of information. And yet the commercial frameworks that we have utilized over the last 10 years drive exactly the opposite behaviors. They drive behaviors of hoarding information because it could be used either to put a claim together or to defend a claim. So we must move to more collaborative commercial frameworks that actually encourage open and transparent sharing of information. And you'll see there on the slide, I've included a picture of the NEC4 suite of contracts. NEC are about to launch an Australian version of this suite of contracts. And I think that this will be a very important occasion for the Australian construction market, because these are a suite of contracts that inherently drive more collaborative and seek to drive more collaborative behaviours. I also think that the federal government has a role to play in all of this. Here in Australia, we do have a situation whereby the money, the substantial amount of the money for constructing infrastructure comes from the federal government, but it is granted to the states through things like the national partnership agreements, and the states are ultimately responsible for delivering the work. And so whilst it is possible, and certainly from an ACA perspective, we have been having conversations through frameworks like SILF to try to drive reform with the states, it is problematic having to deal individually with the states. And I think that we have an opportunity now, as I mentioned earlier. The federal government should get involved. It is incentivized to encourage reform because it has a lot at stake. And so we believe that a great example of how this could be done is the UK Construction Playbook. This was a document that was published by the UK government at the end of last year. And what it does and what it is it's a piece of work that was undertaken not just by the government. This was a piece of work that was where industry came together with government and all other interested stakeholders to develop a document that sets out best practice procurement and delivery. And the UK government has now stipulated that the delivery agencies in the UK must use this construction playbook or explain why not. And there's many quotes that I could have taken out of that playbook, which summarize or talk to a lot of the good things about that. But I've highlighted one in particular there, which I think really sums it up well. We need to think about projects and programs in new ways. Transformational change will only be achieved by systematically approaching risk, sustainability, and innovation across portfolios of projects and programs. We need to harness the excellence which already exists and learn from this to drive progress and strengthen the health of the sector, including by addressing low levels of productivity and future skill shortages. It is in all of our interests to create a profitable, sustainable, and resilient industry with a well-trained workforce for the future. Now, who could argue with that? I mean, that summarises the position that we have here in Australia. And it's not just Australia it's not just the UK that has taken a step forward in this direction. Close to home, across the Tasman, the New Zealand government came out with a construction accord. They've also followed that up with a playbook focused on how to expedite major projects. So I've really sort of skimmed a lot of the stuff that ACA is doing at the moment and the opportunity that we have. But what I wanted to do is to point out where you can find out some more information if you are keen to get involved and to inform yourself about this. And I really do encourage you to do so. So here is a link to our webpage where our 3 thought leadership documents can be found, and they are a response to the 2019 infrastructure audit, which is where we identify the issues, and we engage Biz Oxford Economics to help us prepare that. So it's very data-driven. We've got a document which is called Constructing the Future, which is where we talk about that sustainability model. And finally, we've got a document called Sustaining the Infrastructure Industry, which is where we make our own commitments as an industry to things we can and we will do to affect change. I'd also call out our LinkedIn page, the ACA LinkedIn page. Please feel free to follow that, where you'll find out a lot more current information as and when we come out with further pieces of thought leadership and announcements around this particular topic. But where I want to finally finish is, how can you all help? You've all dialed in here to listen to this presentation today, presumably because you're all interested in seeing reform to our industry and seeing how our industry can get better. How can we make our industry more sustainable? We all have a vested interest in a more sustainable industry, and you all have a part to play in that. And how can you become more, what part is that you can play? Well, you can become more engaged by tuning into presentations like this, by reading thought leadership pieces like the ones that I've referenced in the previous slide, and then spread the word. You're all in various parts of industry. You're all in a position where you can help spread that word. So thank you all for listening. Looking forward to taking your questions shortly. But on that note, I'll hand back.
Thank you, John, for your insights. I would now like to introduce our second speaker, Rogier Rolfing. Rogier applies his many years of strategic management advisory experience to deliver benefits to his wide range of clients. Driven by success and excellence, as well as a never-ending search for efficiency, Rogier is a pragmatist with a passion for informed decision-making. With a diversified background working across a broad range of projects, clients and sectors, Rogier has provided advice on business and project operations, public-private partnerships, business case and feasibility studies, supply chain optimisation and procurement, contract and performance management program and project management, and digitisation of the built environment, with some project values well in excess of $1 billion Australian dollars. Please welcome Rogier Rolfing.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And here I am, Rogier Rolfing. Just want to talk a little bit about the project owner perspective, and particularly focusing on, the phase we're going into as stimulus and recovery funding, lots of what's been promised by the government. Right, Australia is currently the envy of the world. We've established a COVID normal and we're ready to start rebuilding our economies. The federal and state governments have committed billions of dollars in stimulus funding, and they're going to invest that, or have been asked or been telling us that it's going to be in infrastructure. For the last couple of years, and certainly this last year, it's been predicted by many, many different sources that the next technology advances are going to create a paradigm shift in the construction industry. And therefore, we could argue that from our perspective, from a technology perspective, the current conditions for the construction and infrastructure market in Australia and technology is probably as near as perfect as it will ever be. So what does that mean in terms of where we are at? As governments turn to focus on the recovery of the economy and looking to stimulate job and growth, significant investment will be made in infrastructure. Having been allocated funds to deliver capital projects comes usually with high expectations and responsibilities. So are you set up to deliver to that success? The recovery expenditure must deliver benefits in the economy, local communities, create jobs, support an increase in consumer confidence and spending in a COVID normal reality. The challenge is to maximize the return on investment, minimizing administrative cost, selecting the most suitable initiatives and tracking the benefits and outcomes that you're achieving, doing the right project right. The challenge is how to maximize the return on investment for every single stimulus dollar spent. How do you, as a project owner, achieve that while also managing and controlling time, cost, scope, and risk on a project and across a portfolio? And what we have seen across the globe in developed economies in the past is that stimulus funding almost always comes with strict success criteria in addition to the standard value for money. These additional success criteria can broadly be generalized as speed of return, i.e. how quickly is the committed funding returning value into the economy. In commercial terms, it's often called time to value. Climate action is high on the agenda, therefore it's not inconceivable that stimulus funding comes with green credential criteria. Diversity and sharing of wealth and opportunities means, again, that there's a chance that stimulus funding comes with success criteria related to diversity, opportunity creation for different socioeconomic demographics, and maybe even indigenous participation. And this all has to be underpinned by demonstrable criteria to deliver swift cash flow through into small and medium businesses. With the enhanced focus on achieving economic stimulus in the communities, local and national economy, it is inevitable that the stimulus funding conditions will need to be closely monitored and reported upon. What this means is that you're seeking to translate data into demonstrable compliance during the selection process, additional monitoring and reporting requirements and expectations in delivery, evidence and confidence of not wasting resources and funding in inefficiencies. The enhanced focus on achieving economic stimulus and positive impacts brings with it a lot of challenges. Funding can come from multiple sources, each with their own set of requirements. As funding gets pooled to create programs and projects, the reporting against multiple and potential varied requirements becomes increasingly more complex and time-consuming. On the flip side, projects, departments, and agencies will seek funding for initiative, creating business cases and calculating ROIs, making and creating, in doing so, project profiles that provide a cash flow, a delivery schedule, and a scope with particular outcomes. It is important to manage and govern the programs, projects, and initiatives at both the project level and the portfolio level. Tracking the money in the form of cash flow and monitoring budgets against actuals. And of course, monitor progress against the schedules that were planned and the delivery times that are actually achieved, indicating progress and ultimately the results against the targeted outcomes, therefore demonstrating that the stimulus and funding programs achieve the outcomes that they set out to achieve. Standardized monitoring and capturing of the requirements using technology will allow you to provide hindsight, insight, and foresight across your portfolio. Access to data and information allows you to make informed decisions. Informed decisions not only allow you to deliver the required outcomes in your portfolio, delivering upon the requirements and creating a reputation to repeatedly do so also increases your chances for securing future funding. Industry is awash with good practice on project, program, and portfolio management. And within the context of economic recovery, the opportunities lie within the ability to obtain near real-time data insights to allow for informed decision-making. Visibility of events within the projects across the program provide an opportunity to achieve and optimize practices and manage associated funds. When the challenge is to achieve a return on investment as soon as possible, whilst continuing to meet strict funding conditions, data insights and visibility provide the means by which to make informed decisions, aiding the expediency without compromise. Visibility of time, cost, scope, and risk in a project, program, or within a portfolio, combined with analytics functionality, provides early warning of potentially adverse impacts and providing opportunity for course correction. So how does technology help in this? We are familiar with the iron triangle of time, cost, and scope, and that events that change any one of those three will require an adjustment at least one other to restore the balance. For example, if a time schedule delay has occurred, this could be rectified by either increasing the budget, increasing the resources applied, or reducing the scope of the project. Technology now affords us the opportunity to supercharge that iron triangle and by adding in risk and modeling and analytics, and expanding it from just a project level into program and portfolio. Point solutions connected via platforms and within ecosystems make this possible. Just on point solutions, platforms, and ecosystems, it's important to understand the difference between them. Point solutions provide standalone technology solution for a single functional problem, typically generating and relying on its own data held within the actual application. A platform is a centralized connection that can connect point solutions, utilizes the data from each of these applications, and provide data insights and facilitates the sharing of data and information between point solutions. An ecosystem consists of a number of connected point solutions and platforms to collectively achieve successful outcomes. A successful ecosystem for capital works delivery includes a platform at its core, connecting individual point solutions, allowing them to work together to provide you with data and information to make informed decisions. Before moving into specifically and some ideas about project owner technology tools, it would be remiss of me not to highlight a number of potential pitfalls of technology. First and most important is, of course, security. It is important to understand how secure the system, data, and privacy is dealt with, and whether or not the technology solution in effect makes you reliant on a third party, i.e. somebody you don't have a contract with, for your data and information security. Infrastructure construction success is highly reliant on collaboration across disciplines, stakeholders, and even jurisdictions. Be wary of solutions that are based on a single super user administration rights. These types of solutions are counterproductive in terms of collaboration and sharing of data, especially when contractors, stakeholders, and subcontractors' data and information is visible to the super user, including proprietary information and data. Or even when super users can make changes to that data and information, or worst of all, shut contractors, subcontractors, or you out from the system without notice, cutting you off from your own data. Unauditable records and audit trails become increasingly critical and are fundamental in cases of disagreement and even disputes. Within technology solutions, how is the data integrity maintained and guaranteed? And how does it create an unauditable audit trail and record of agreements, changes, variations, amendments, etc.? As stated before, be mindful that super user systems, because that give a single party access to all records and data and an ability to manipulate that. Informed decision making should lie at the base of your continuous improvements. In order to make informed decisions, you need access to your portfolio, program, and project data, including any correlation and connections between those, with an ability to conduct data analysis across all your data and projects to identify trends and obtain true insights. A common misconception is that data and information management is the same as collaboration or vice versa. Data and information management is the function of collating, storing, and cataloging all project data and information, whereas collaboration is the process of working together between different stakeholders, which is greatly improved with the sharing of data and information, but only if the data integrity can be trusted and a technology solution does not compromise the intellectual properties of the participant or the established contractual framework. Another common misconception is that project data management is the same as having a common data environment or CDE. And there are some clear differences between the two, as you can read on the slide in the table there. We have introduced an integrated platform approach, but we would also like to leave you with some thoughts and considerations around necessary foundational capabilities that support successful digital transformation. When looking at these, 3 key precepts should be considered. 1, synchronizing processes, procedures, protocols in the organization, gathering and reporting of data information. The second is empowering of data and information and the ability to report, analyze, adjust, predict outcomes to make timely course corrections, and connected and integrated technology and systems to deliver enhanced outcomes and synergies. Akin to the 1 + 1 = 3. These in turn create opportunities for consistency to manage and control time, cost, scope, and risk as a result of consistency in data capture, application of processes and procedures. Collaboration, enabling coordination to drive efficiency and effectiveness, which in capital works delivery leads to value for money and maximizing the return on investment. And analytics, perform the analysis across and within data sets, providing deep knowledge and information that can be used to achieve successful outcomes. Together, these foundational capabilities will help you achieve the appropriate level of maturity that comes from firstly insight, or hindsight I should say, to insight, and then foresight from data and information. Hindsight is the learning from experiences, carrying forward lessons learned, and have the benefit of hindsight on events. Insight gives you an insight into events unfolding in real time to make informed reactive decisions, and foresight uses data and information to predict outcomes of scenarios and support informed proactive decision making. Fund and program management is by no means an easy task for project owners. Imagine a project has 2 or 3 different funding sources making up the total project budget, each with similar and somewhat different reporting requirements. The project has a pre-agreed time schedule and a budget related to the scope. Each periodic report needs to report against these project-specific performance parameters. Now multiply that across a program and a portfolio. In order to be efficient and effective in reporting across a program and a portfolio to satisfy all the stakeholders, technology can be used to track progress against forecasts and outcomes. Standardizing the tools and technology across the portfolio allows you for required insights in data and information that gives you access to the health of your portfolio of projects. Having access to data and information reduces your governance effort whilst allowing you, as the project owner, to proactively contribute to the economic impact that the stimulus funding is intended to achieve. The introduction and use of technology provides benefits in your project owner governance, management, and administration. It provides access to good industry practice capabilities that allows you and your community to benefit from stimulus funding. Benefits in governance, management, and administrative efficiency through automation include, for example, data entry and workflows, reporting and analysis, planning and information research, and best practices and performance management. With optimized governance, management, and administrative performance comes the opportunity to deliver to the goals of the stimulus funding. It puts you in a position to communicate progress and impact, allows you to meet scope, timing, and cost objectives of the project's program across your portfolio, directly influencing local economies. It is our mission to help people see data in new ways, discover insights, unlock endless possibilities. Data and technology can provide many benefits at almost every juncture in capital works delivery. Hindsight, insight, and foresight generated by technology, data, and information are well within our reach and provide an enhanced capability to deliver upon our collective responsibility to maximize the return of any economic stimulus and/or public funds spent on social and economic infrastructure, delivering projects with certainty, on time, against budget, and against scope. We look forward to working with you and achieving this collective success. Thanks very much for your attention and your ears, and looking forward to having a chat. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for two great presentations. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the audience for all the questions that are coming through. It's now your turn to get involved, and our speakers will come together to take questions from you. If you could please send any questions for the panel via the chat box on the screen, ensuring you provide your name and who the question is directed to. I might kick off with a question that we received on registration. Thank you for everyone for doing that too. And while Rogier is on the floor, we could talk about, we've had a couple of questions around project owners. And I might try and combine these questions. This is from Moyes in New South Wales and James in Queensland, asking what is the project owner's perspective of how a project should be run? And secondly, how will project owners improve productivity to deliver the current infrastructure investment? Rogier.
Thanks for those questions. So let me start with the last question. Productivity for the project owners is potentially, or is something very different than productivity for the project deliverers. So I'm going to look at this from the project owner's perspective first. Project owner's perspective, productivity is around, not wasting time, not wasting resources, having the right procurement processes, having the right information to make the right decisions at the right time as a project owner. So you are not wasting time on resources that should be used to actually deliver the projects. Productivity from a project delivery perspective is around doing the project right. Yeah, so actually deciding that you are going to be efficient, effective, maximizing the use of resourcing, minimizing waste on site, being lean. There's lots of principles around that, how you can do that. And again, technology helps in that by having visibility into what's happening on site, how you're going to deliver on that, and how that works. I've forgotten the first part of the question. Can you remind me, Amanda?
Yeah, so the first part of the question, what is the project owner's perspective of how projects should be run?
Successfully, I suppose, is the short answer to that question. But it's about making sure that the project is geared up to achieve the outcomes that it's set out to achieve. So particularly government projects come with a business case, come with a set of requirements that say, hey, we want to achieve this by this particular time. And the requirements that go within that are wide and varied. Yes, it is delivering a particular asset by a particular time and having that available, but it's also about how that goes along the way, whether they are diversity factors in there or green credentials that need to be met or anything like that. So success from a project owner isn't necessarily procuring a contract to deliver the project. It's also how that project is then getting delivered throughout the stages of the project.
Thank you, Rogier. John, in your presentation, you talk quite a bit about culture, and it's something Engineers Australia is talking about a lot at the moment in the sector. And you talked about how we can improve the level of trust and collaboration and the work of the task force. We have a question, John, and he's asking you, do you think the work hour culture in Australia has affected the productivity problem?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Amanda. I think the work hour, I think what the question is asking there is that we have a culture here in Australia of working long hours, and that feeds into the culture of our industry, the broader culture of our industry, and some negative aspects there. What's quite interesting is to point to a trial. I guess in this instance, there are a number of trials going on at the minute which are looking at a 5-day week. And the early sort of indications from those trials are that it does lead to significant improvements in productivity, because what we see is that despite the hours being reduced, the projects, there's no substantial deterioration to the schedule. So the projects are getting completed largely on time, which can only really be explained by an improvement in productivity. I think that we do have this issue or this culture of let's postpone a concrete pour from Friday afternoon to Saturday morning, so we can get some overtime out of this. I think that is quite prevalent, but I think that there are issues just as much. There are issues on the client side as well. I mean, if we look at delivery agencies coming out before Christmas time and with tenders for the market and putting an expectation on the market to work extended hours to get that back, when in reality there is no great benefit in doing so. So I think there's a definite issue in terms of those working hours and how that feeds into culture.
Thank you for that, John. And while you're there, we've had a great question from Reese. And he's citing, you're referencing the NEC framework. And Reese is asking, aside from Sydney Water, has any other client utilised the NEC framework? Having been previously in the UK, I found them very fair for both parties and reduced the involvement of lawyers. John?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Reese. The short answer to that is I'm only aware of one other client organisation or delivery agency here in Australia that is doing that. There have been at least one trial of its use by Department of Transport and Main Roads in WA. But I do know it is being actively considered by a number of other delivery agencies. And also it is being considered by Infrastructure Australia currently, as a lot of the people on this call will be aware. This year sees the update of the 2016 infrastructure plan by Infrastructure Australia. And that infrastructure plan talks to what do we need to change? What are the things that we need to reform if we're going to construct the infrastructure that we need here in Australia?
Thanks, John. We've had a few questions that have come in around risk, which is great. And I think we have one here that sort of sums it up really, really well, and direct it to Rogier. It's what incentives are in place in Australia to enable the relevant stakeholders to make best for project decisions in a timely manner without risking program costs, safety, O&M requirements? Rogier, you might want to kick off with that.
Well, data and information is the short answer there. It's having the right data available for you to make those decisions. So identifying everything. So if I take, for example, schedules, have you got all the risks in that, and have you determined how likely it is that any of them materializing, and have you factored that into the way it's built into your program? Do you know what is the riskiest part of your program? Can you do that analysis? Have you got the right data and information and tools to do that? So there's a lot of ways of dealing with risk, but risk is also one of those areas where you can find a lot of dead money. What I mean with that is we have these big risk contingency pots of money set aside on projects, and they're not doing anything. They're not delivering any project. They're not contributing to the scope or anything like that. They're just there as an insurance provision, if you like. And having visibility around risk and the passing of time and the passing of risk windows will give you an opportunity to maybe release those funds out of that pot if as a particular risk has passed, that risk window has closed, and therefore you can take some of that money out of that risk and use it to actually contribute to delivering the project or delivering another project. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff around risk. Risk is a well-researched and a well established discipline. So in terms of general risk management and mitigation, firstly, I would look at the discipline of risk management. And the second part of that is then making sure you have the right tools, connectivity, the right solutions, collecting the right data for you to make informed decisions. I believe that kind of answered the question.
Thanks, Roger. John, do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. My sort of view on that, if I can recall the question correctly, what incentives are in place to achieve these best for project outcomes? I think that question does talk to or highlight a particular issue that we have within our industry, which is where construction is very much viewed as a zero-sum game. So that is a situation whereby if I win, that means that you've got to lose, and vice versa. We don't spend enough time at the front end of the job aligning expectations, aligning outcomes. It is possible to have a win-win outcome if we spend the time at the start aligning all of the parties and getting clear what the expectations are and what it is that we're trying to achieve. That doesn't necessarily have to be compromised. Admittedly, sometimes time, cost, quality, the equation that Roger was talking about before, that there are implications to decisions. But where I think the biggest bang for buck that we have is spending more time, as I say, up front and aligning those interests such that we're all working together when problems come up, especially as sort of Roger talked about with risk. Risk is a great example where the current situation in that sort of zero-sum environment is that contractors essentially are put in a position where they have to put aside significant sums of money to deal with these particular risks. Whereas if we aligned, it's possible that we could align outcomes and incentives whereby those risks are jointly managed, and therefore the need to put aside that money and for someone to take essentially a big bet on it at the end of the day, it removes that particular requirement.
Thanks, John.
Can I just add something, Amanda? Sorry to interrupt. Can I just add something to what John was just saying? The upfront work is definitely a requirement and an area to focus on, but it's then also sharing that information and everything you learn, particularly as a public sector, and handing that over to the private sector so they can put their proposals together on the basis of knowledge and not on the basis of guessing and knowing what's happening. And that, in terms of efficiency and productivity that was asked earlier, stopping private sector and contractors to redo and reinvent the wheel on a project that the government and public sector with all its advisors has already solved or at least partially solved the problem. I think it will add to that better, more fair balance as well.
Thanks, Roger. I just want to talk a little bit about, we've had a great question and it's talking about innovating, and we do talk about that a lot. And we are talking about it a lot at the moment with the building boom and sustainability and quality in construction. And this question has been nicely put together in relation to risk. And we're being asked, we hear that on certain projects it's not worth innovating because it risks the project program as approval processes are undefined and it takes forever. if at all, to get innovations approved? John, do you want to kick off with that? Great question.
Yeah, no, it is a good question, and happy to kick off that particular discussion. I think there's a few real impediments here to innovation. I think that first point in that question is probably a good one. I think that, to be quite frank, we have a situation currently whereby contractors are essentially, their primary focus is just on staying in business. It is going from one project to the next project. They might make a loss on one project, so they move on to the next project. And the focus is not around innovation. The focus is purely and simply on making a return on the investment that they've put in to that business. But I think from a client side perspective, we've got a significant impediment to innovation as well. What we see is, especially government delivery agencies, very much wedded to these old, sometimes 30-year-old prescriptive specifications for projects. We're still building roads not too dissimilarly to how the Romans built roads. We've got to facilitate innovation. And one way that we can facilitate innovation is if we move towards more performance-based specifications and away from these prescriptive specifications.
Thank you, John. I want to turn to the tools, and Rogier, you might want to pick this one, and it comes from Sabina. Thank you, Sabina, who's based in Victoria. What tools are available, or do you are recommended to measure returns? Rogier.
Thanks for that question, Sabina, if I heard the name correctly. There's lots of things. It just depends on how you want to return, how do you want to measure the return on investment, and how do you quantify that. Yeah, quantifying for a return on investment, as John mentioned it early in his slide deck, that for every $1 investment in infrastructure, there's $3 into the economy. Now, that's a very potentially economic return of investment, the way that is calculated probably by somebody really smart and economics and economists and people like that. So how do you measure the return on investment becomes therefore critical as to what tools you need to do that. If the return on investment is calculated by reducing project cost overruns, which is something that John mentioned as well, is a big challenge for us in Australia. Then there are tools that then think, well, if what causes my cost overruns? It could be time overruns, could be incorrect estimating, it could be incorrect management of changes and variations that go through the process. So determining what those areas are that potentially causing the overruns will then help you decide which tools you need to manage that and what information and data you need to keep an eye on to actually track that going forward. So there isn't a straightforward one-size-fits-all which tool is appropriate for return on investment. But the one thing that is important is when you do make an investment is that you understand how you are achieving the return on the investment that you're making.
Thank you for that, Rogier. We have a question here from Nirav in Victoria. Rogier, again directed to yourself, asking how effectively lessons learned can be applied to increase delivery certainty of capital projects. Thank you.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because there's a lot of buzz around that with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And what those technologies do is actually learn from past instances, past incidents, and how they were resolved, and learning from that, and taking that and then giving you a proactive, predictive recommendation as to what you should do in the particular situation that you might find yourself in. Now, I also appreciate that AI machine learning is a bit of a black box for most people. So that's not the only way that you can use lessons learned. Lessons learned can simply come from, hey, we've designed a school before. Why are we paying an architect to redesign a school? Share the designs or share the particular solutions, but you can only do that if you've captured them in a way that you can search for those solutions going forward. And that's all about document management and document control. What did you come up with? How do you use those lessons learned so you're not making the same mistakes either, or reinventing the wheel, or whatever proverb you want to throw at it? There are many ways for us to do that. To listen, to relearn, to prevent from relearning the lessons that we've learned previously. But you need to be able to gather the data, collect the data, and then find it again when you need it. And that's it. That's sometimes a challenge with what I said in my presentation, having point solutions that are not connected to the platform. So you have bits of pieces of information sitting in different systems, and if you can't connect them, you may not have that ability to search or get that synergy between those different data sets to actually use the benefit of those lessons learned.
Thank you. Thank you. John, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd like to actually, Amanda. I think 100% agree with what Roger has to say. But from a contractor standpoint, I think one area that we can do more on, and or from a project perspective, where we can do more, and I think this is that there are some really good examples around this. Is where if we can take a sort of a programmed approach to project delivery, and I accept that that's not possible in all sort of circumstances. But if we look at the level crossing removal program, for example, in Victoria, where we have a situation where we have 70 plus level crossings that ultimately need to be removed, but we have a panel of contractors that are delivering that, and they're incentivized to share the information, to share learnings throughout that program of work. And those learnings, they're again reinvested back into future projects, and the performance over time increases substantially. Another international example that I'm aware of something similar on a major project was Crossrail in London, where they actually had essentially a learning database and a project academy where contractors were actually incentivized to innovate and to share those innovations amongst all of the contractors on that major project, and that led to substantial productivity improvements during the course of the project as well.
Thanks, John. John, in your presentation, you talked a bit of some of the tools that maybe haven't been adopted as well as some people would have thought. We talked about the bin, etc. And we also talked about the importance of collaboration and ensuring that behaviours actually aren't working in reverse of what the intention has been. And we've had a few questions around clients and about how do we better collaborate with clients, upskill clients, to make sure they are making well-informed decisions about how we best go forward in this space. John, I might start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Without wanting to come on here and start bashing clients, I think that it is appropriate to, when we talk about a capability and capacity issue within industry, this isn't just a contractor issue. This is an issue across industry as a whole. And there are some really good things that are happening in this space. So, for example, we're seeing the creation, or originally it was called the Victorian Major Projects Academy, I think it was. I might have got that one wrong, but something along those lines, which was set up with the specific purpose of training people within Victorian delivery agencies to enhance their skills in terms of project delivery. Now that has been expanded now and involves other jurisdictions as well, and there's even talk of that being expanded further to involve people from contracting organisations as well. So there's a lot that can be done in there. I mean, we can talk a lot about different ways of procuring, different ways of delivering. The culture piece, the trust piece, that's something else. That's something that is going to take, unfortunately, is going to take time. It's not possible to address trust deficits overnight. But I think it's important that what we are seeing is that there is a real willingness to do that. This opportunity that COVID presents us with, this great challenge that we have as an industry, does give us that opportunity really to start addressing, coming together. We've already done that. We've already seen during last year when COVID first hit, we saw contractors, clients, unions and other stakeholder groups all coming together and all working together to keep projects up and running and to keep them going. And I think that what is incumbent upon all of us now is to continue that spirit of cooperation and build on that cooperation and really take this opportunity to reform and make our industry more sustainable.
Thank you, John. Roger, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I think, I mean, I agree with what John is saying, but to add to that is it's a matter of visibility and transparency, isn't it? We're still very much in a scenario where we have a client who says, just go and give me a prize for doing this, but maybe not sharing all the information, or maybe not even sharing all its intentions for that particular asset or that particular project. And then the contractor giving or the market giving a response to that and saying, here's a number, or how you arrived at that number. Well, it's the right number because here's some benchmarks, trust me, it's the right number kind of thing. I've included everything, and then they don't, and that's where that breakdown of trust comes from potentially. But if we could do that through that collaboration and give the transparency and use technology to have the transparency available for everybody. So it sounds really scary. It sounds really scary that if you on either side of that a contract all of a sudden are exposed and everything is on the table. But ultimately, and John mentioned it before, it's a focus on the outcomes. What are the outcomes that we are seeking to achieve? Nobody wins by the clients screwing the contractors or the contractors screwing the clients. Excuse the language, but that's what an attitude thing is, that often is a perception, at least, of what's happening in industry and on projects. So how do we do that is by trusting each other and being transparent and being honest and treating the other party the way we want to be treated ourselves. And we can use the technology then to collaborate, to share this information, to have an appropriate contract structure around that still protects everybody, but we have defined the outcomes that we want to achieve. And that's where this stimulus and recovery work is so important, because it's not per se about building the new rail line or building the new road or patching the holes in the road or building new schools or whatever the money is being spent on. It's about achieving that asset, but also achieving the return on that investment into the community and tracking that. And that requires transparency. That requires collaboration, that requires cooperation of all parties involved. And that's a challenge, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get there, unfortunately. But yeah, jump in is what I say, and be a bit more sharing and of data and information on both sides. So I think the question was, how do we get the clients to do that better? I think there is that real culture. It's like, what are you trying to achieve is not always what is being procured or communicated in the procurement process.
Thank you, Roger. We are coming towards the end.
Just follow up on that, Amanda.
Absolutely, John.
I think, yeah, I completely agree with Roger. And we have a situation, and I really don't know how we ended up here, but we have a situation where it's almost viewed as a terrible thing for a contractor to make money. And until we get to a situation where there's a recognition that everyone should be entitled to make a return on their investment, provided, of course, they don't majorly stuff things up, then we're still going to see this issue. And I think Roger's point is an excellent one around the importance of data in all of this, the importance of sharing information. And that really, if we can become more transparent in terms of sharing of information, that potentially will help to build trust levels up. But the key, really, one of the key issues with that is that we've got to address the forms of contract that we're currently using. These very sort of adversarial zero-sum game contracts. And we're not talking here, I mean, when I talk about more collaborative forms of contract, people sort of say, oh, you contractors, all you want is alliance-style contracts, you want cost-plus contracts. Well, look, no, there are time and a place for those much more collaborative forms of contract where there are significant risks and significant unknowns in a project. But that's not to say that we can't have more collaboration within existing forms of contract, which is why I drew attention to the NEC suite in my presentation. We've got to facilitate that open and transparent sharing of information. That's how, as an industry, we'll improve.
Thank you, John. And just to close, so today we've talked about technology and transparency and collaboration and culture and communications. And also, John, you did a great call to arms and how people can engage on behalf of Engineers Australia for our young professional engineers that are coming through into this COVID recovered, hopefully, world. Is there any advice you would like to give to them that are entering this sector? Rogier.
You jump in with enthusiasm is what I say, but equally, challenge status quo and don't be afraid to do that, because the world is moving at a very, very fast pace. And just because things have been done in a certain way for a period of time doesn't necessarily mean they can't be changed or at least adjusted. And I think that's part of the conversation around innovation. Innovation comes at different levels, isn't it? It doesn't have to go from zero to hero. It can be gradual, making gradual changes and improvements, and that comes from people being enthusiastic about the industry they work on, enthusiastic and committed to the projects that they are working on, and not just taking no for an answer. Challenge what you can out there within, respectfully, but challenge, go out there, be brave.
Love it. John.
Well, Roger, you should have gone last. I don't know whether I could beat that. I completely agree with what you said there. It is, don't be afraid to challenge anything. You are the future of our industry. I occasionally have the great honour of participating in an initiative called Construction Area, which is, unfortunately, is just a Queensland-based initiative at the moment, but hopefully it will become a national initiative soon, where we get together a young cohort from across industry to work together and build a replica bridge. And I always come away from that session completely inspired. It's very easy to become cynical and jaded in our industry, but there is a wealth of talent and enthusiasm coming through. And I'd point you through to, there are some great initiatives that are out there. I've been, again, fortunate to participate in one on LinkedIn that's run by two gentlemen, Shivendra Kumar and Matthew Mackey, which is a forum through LinkedIn where people that aren't necessarily aligned to any particular industry association or big company can get in there, can get involved in an industry chat about all of these particular issues. So please, as I said in the presentation, be engaged. And as Roger said, please don't be afraid to challenge.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So, jump in with enthusiasm, challenge the status quo, don't be afraid, and you are the future. What wonderful words to close on. That's all we have time for today. On behalf of all of you who have joined us online, I'd like to say thank you to John Davies and Rogier Rolfing for their time and insights and inspirational presentations today. I'd also like to thank again Engineers Australia's industry partner, Oracle Construction and Engineering, for making today's webinar possible. We'd also appreciate, as always, we're always learning as well, if you could complete a short feedback survey about your experience of the webinar today. There's a link in the description box that you can use. So once again, thank you for joining us. We had great attendance and engagement with this session, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Thought Leaders event. Thank you.